Welcome to Talk Travel with Heather Tate, North Mississippi's podcast for savvy travelers. Talk Travel with Heather Tate is a weekly podcast that airs every Monday on the Shark 102.3 FM radio station based in Ripley, Mississippi, and is then released as a podcast. Travel advisor and travel enthusiast Heather Tate of Whimsical Destinations gives listeners expert travel tips curated through the years of personal and professional experience. By clicking subscribe, you'll have a new travel tip to add to your collection delivered to your podcast library every Monday. Talk Travel with Heather Tate is brought to you by Sun Bear Studio. Sun Bear Studio is a boutique recording studio in the heart of Ripley, Mississippi. When you record with us at Sun Bear Studio, we can mix, master, register, and publish your music, your podcast, or your family story. Email us when you're ready at sunbear@jc.media.
This program was recorded at Sun Bear Studio in Ripley, Mississippi.
Good morning, Northeast Mississippi travelers. This is Heather with Talk Travel with Heather Tate, and I am so excited to share my tried and true tips and adventures with you, whether you are also a seasoned traveler, a hopeful traveler, or an armchair traveler, meaning you're going to follow along with us from home for now. This is our 184th episode of Talk Travel with Heather Tate. And this week is all going to be about safety travel concerns, weighing the risk, and controlling the controllable. Travel is one of the most enriching experiences we can have here in life. It broadens your worldview, can strengthen relationships, builds confidence, and your sense of self, and even more. But we know it is not without risk. When traveling, it is not uncommon to have concerns or even anxiety over the weather, health, like sickness, personal sickness, or if you could become sick, crime, political unrest, even sharks. And don't pretend that you have never rethought swimming in the ocean over sharks, because it can't just be me. I mean, there have hardly been a time when I have been snorkeling when I'm not constantly scanning my head back and forth, and I think I'm going to see Brucey from Finding Nemo at any moment. So I'm always on the lookout for sharks. I have had trips almost canceled over a volcano in Iceland, software systems crashing or updates, airport delays and cancellations for a host of reasons, strikes, hurricanes, ice storms, tornadoes. I mean, you name it. I have had trips that have been impacted or almost impacted. And some things, in fact, most of these things are outside of your control. So you would think there's not a lot we can do about the things outside of our control, but there is. There are some things that we can handle outside of our control. And when I say that, that means being aware of them. So we may not be able to change them, but we can be aware of them, and that can make all the difference. We can also then be prepared for things. So the next thing I'm going to ask is, what are things within your control? So first, let's look at these things within your control. And that might be an easier way of looking at this instead of like, okay, how can I solve all of these things outside of my control? I do not have control over if, the people at the airport, TSA, or the ground crew, if they're striking, or if trains in Italy are having a strike. Like, I have no control over this. I have no control over a volcano erupting in whether it's St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or whether it's Iceland or Italy. We have no control over this. So what are some things that you do have control of? Let's start there first. Think about this. How easy would it be for you to get home in case of an emergency? So, that's one reason why couples who are traveling with children, if they're wanting to do a couple trip, just the two of them, they will often go somewhere only a 4-hour or less distance away. They'll go to the Caribbean versus Europe, because if they needed to get back in a hurry, instead of it taking them a potential day, they could get back within a few hours, depending on which island. I will say this: Jamaica and the Bahamas have the most flights, I feel like, of any Caribbean island. So that gives you the most options, typically, those two locations. So thinking about where it will be easy to fly home if you needed to. Passports. So say you're taking a cruise And you don't have to have a passport in every situation. If you're doing a closed loop cruise, meaning you're leaving from one U.S. port and returning to the same U.S. port like Miami or Port Canaveral, Seattle, you don't have to necessarily have a passport. Now, you need to check this because it can be different rules for different cruise lines. But the general rule is you can use a birth certificate and a government ID, photo ID. But I still recommend that you have a passport. Why? And I tell each and every one of my clients who ask me, do I have to have a passport? I'm like, the short answer is no, not always. Do I recommend it though? Yes. And here's why. Because if you need to fly home in an emergency, even if you're on a cruise where you didn't need that passport, you would then need that passport to fly home. So I recommend then having a passport regardless. Watch the weather, be aware, but don't obsess. So there's a difference, right? Like if it looks like it's going to rain every day in Jamaica, we're not talking a hurricane, but we're talking it looks like it's going to have a rain shower daily. Don't fret about that because I will say that means there can be rain somewhere on the island, somewhere in the area, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be at the beach. It could be in the mountains, in the rainforest. So it may have a 90% chance of rain and it may rain for 30 minutes that day or an hour that day in the afternoon. So don't obsess over it. Same with Florida. As we know, the weather in Florida changes. There's hardly been a time when I've gone to Disney World where I have not gotten soaking wet at some point. So what can you do? Bring waterproof shoes, right? And ponchos. And be prepared that your schedule might change some. Also note that sometimes you're able to get on rods much easier if it rains than if you didn't. So it's all about that attitude then. Do you have an immediate obligation when you get home? Build in buffer days. I know my husband would say that this is not a good point for me to make because I do not take this advice. I like for him to come home the day before he needs to be back at work so I can make the most of that trip. So this is where I'm going to say, do as I say and not as I do. If you need to build in buffer days, because if you were to have a delay from your flights and not be able to come home till a day or two later, you want to have some time built in then that you could still make it back and not have that obligation that you would miss out on. Always get the travel protection, even if it doesn't prevent something from happening, right? Like we can only control what we can control. It can make it to then where you have peace of mind because chances are you're not going to need the travel protection. But if you did need it, you would have it. Because my rule for travel protection that I always say, it is better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Okay? Don't panic or rush to social media every time something happens. Everyone thinks that they are an expert and they can become a keyboard warrior pretty quickly. Instead, you want to look at trusted travel sites. Also, find out information from people who are there in destination before you're going or right now. If you're planning a trip months from now and it seems like there's some issues with the airlines canceling for a day, I wouldn't worry about canceling my trip months out at this point. Think about, okay, when is my final payment due? When is my last opportunity to cancel without penalty? Do I have travel protection? These are all things that you can do and you should consider before rushing to cancel, because what can happen is if you rush to cancel for something months from now that you've already had booked and you've already been making payments, and then closer to time you realize, I should have kept that reservation. You go to rebook it, and it's more expensive now, or it's not even available now. Also, check the U.S. Safety Advisory for the level ratings of the places that you're going. Use that for a guide, not just someone heard something from 10 years ago and that destination, right? So you want to make sure your sources are not only reliable, that they're relevant, and they're recent. So that's something important too. Can things happen anywhere at any time? Yes, they can. So that's why you want to be aware. Whenever we are going out of the country, we always register for the STEP Traveler program, where then that way we're registered where they know where we are. In the event something happens, they know we're out of the country. They know which resorts or hotels we're staying at. They can reach us. Have pictures of your passports and leave those with a trusted family member at home. In the event, that something gets lost or stolen or damaged, that you have copies. The other thing I suggest is that you travel with a travel-friendly credit card. Don't just have cash. Don't just have debit cards, bank debit cards. You want to be able to have access that if you needed money right then to be able to get home, safely in a hurry, that you have a credit card, even if you only use it for travel. That's something I definitely recommend. So whereas we cannot, with a crystal ball, we don't have a crystal ball to be able to tell what's going to happen, months from now or weeks from now. There are things that we can control, and that's where we should focus. And that's where, with travel comes a little bit of trust, a little bit of risk. But with those things also come making memories for a lifetime. So you want to be able to weigh those and think, okay, if not right now, if this is not the perfect time, instead of canceling, maybe I delay it. Maybe I shift gears. Maybe I rethink where I was going to go, change locations. Instead of canceling altogether, I rethink. We had to do this a few weeks ago when we were getting ready to go on our cruise. We were flying to Puerto Rico, and we were going to be sailing out of Puerto Rico. And when all the airlines canceled a Saturday, and we thought, is this going to be something that affects us for weeks or for months? Is this for hours? Is this for a day? And I thought, sometimes you just have to hang tight, and you just have to watch and wait and see what's going to happen to see if we needed to make the decision to go. And after 24 hours, the airlift ban was lifted. So we were able, flights were continuing the very next day. So control the controllable and be prepared for everything else. That's all the time we have for this week's episode of Talk Travel with Heather Tate. Life is a great adventure. Make the plan. Take the trip. You won't regret it.
This show is made possible by JC Media, LLC in Ripley, Mississippi. JC Media owns the Shark 102.3 Classic Rock FM radio station where the show is hosted, and Sun Bear Recording Studio where the interviews are recorded. We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Amazon Music, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That email is theshark1023@gmail.com. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite app or stream episodes online at shark1023.com/podcasts. Today's episode was produced by Melinda Marsalis. It was edited by Rick Williams and engineered by Chris Marsalis. The podcast technician is Joyce Grady.